Welcome back to the Pathfinders Podcast. I'm your host, Pete Schramm, founder and CEO of Latitude. And today we're going to talk about two big things: your personal board of advisors and your career map. We base this off of the Pathfinders methodology. The personal board of advisors being those couple of different mentors that you have along the way, the folks that are guiding you right throughout that whole process, which is your career map, something that you have to share with them and show with them as you keep growing. Career maps your past, present, and future. We look at it in 5 different dimensions. John's going to talk about that today, from the roles you filled, the skills, achievements, and accomplishments, education and certs, and some of the fun stuff as well. So let me tell you about the bio of who is joining us today. Before I even read some of the words that he shared with me, he is awesome. He walks the walk, talks the talk, and I'm grateful to call him a friend. So John Bernatovicz, that's how you say his name. Be very, very careful. He's a devoted husband and father before anything else, and he likes to make that very clear, and I admire one of the many things about him for that. Accomplished entrepreneur, serves as the president of Willory, which is a leading HR and payroll staffing and consulting firm. Diverse background and published author of HR Like a Boss. This is a signed copy, by the way. He's a competitive amateur golfer. More to come on that soon. Guy loves to golf. Professional coach, podcast host, which he'll tell us a little bit more today. Keynote speaker, tons and tons of speaking engagements coming up in 2025. To be honest, I don't know how he does everything. It's such a high quality. It's like he has, extra hours in the day or something. Anyways, throughout John's career, he's owned 6 businesses and guided Willory to notable achievements, earned accolades such as the North Coast 99, Inc. 5000. We talked about his book, and I'm bringing it up again because it is so important for those HR leaders out there. One of the other cool things that they did with the HR Like a Boss community is that they brought it together so that people can grow with this together. It did become a #1 bestseller in the HR category. So before we bring John onto the show, I want to share his favorite quote by Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. Fun facts about John: other than making people feel great, he did beat Tiger Woods at golf when he was 18 years old. We'll ask him more about that one. He coached golf at his high school, and his dream is to one day play in a professional golf tournament. So for all of our golfers out there, and for all of our professional golf tournament coordinators that are listening to this podcast, please make sure that you give John, who also loves to dance, a call. Usually it's a winning dance. John, welcome to the show.
Pete, I got to tell you, can you come with me on the road and do all my intros? I've been blessed to have many intros in my life, and it's always a humbling experience. But the whole time I was smiling because you nailed the pronunciation of my name, which that should probably give you the triple gold star. But then in addition to that, it was just so fun to hear you tell that story, because I know you know most of those things, many of them because of our friendship and your kindness of meeting you at the Pittsburgh HR Association years ago. But I love you, bud. I'm so thankful to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a few words of wisdom, maybe some funny stories, and let's see how we can make fun of ourselves along the way.
Hey, that's easy. Let's start off with your last name. What are some of the best butcherings that you've had? I know I've heard Bernatovicz. What did I say earlier? Bernatovicz. But what are some of the fun ones that you've heard over the years?
The most common pronunciation of my last name is nothing. Typically, when someone hasn't been as well prepared as you are, so inside baseball, for those of you that are listening and watching, Pete did ask me specifically how to pronounce my name, which in all honesty, as a podcast host, it's my greatest fear is mispronouncing someone's name, because I have such a difficult name to pronounce. And it has never, ever until about 3 weeks ago been pronounced correctly on the first attempt. And the young lady that announced it properly was actually from Warsaw, Poland, which is where my name comes from. And she knows Bernatovich's. She called him Bernatowitz's because the V used to be a W. It's a long story. But you asked me a question. I'm going to give you 2 answers. The most common thing is a pause. And next up is our speaker, or welcome to the show, John. And then it's, oh, shoot, I don't know how to pronounce this name. I'm going to give a long pause. They look at me and I just say, John's fine, or John B. Then they ask me how to pronounce it and I tell them. That's the typical thing that happens. The funniest story that ever happened, this goes back to some of the things you shared with golf. I was playing in the J. Edward Good Park 10 and under golf championship. This is in July of, I won't even give you the date because I don't want to make sure you know how old I am. It's okay.
Years ago, yeah.
It was a few years ago when I was 10, and I was so excited to be there. And it's one of those times, very first time I got announced on the first tee. They do a great job of making you feel like you're a professional golfer. If you've ever been to a professional golf tournament, they would say, well, next up is the champion of the 2013 U.S. Open, Tiger Woods, and the crowd would clap. Well, they did the same thing at this tournament. And the kid before me's name, I remember it vividly, his name was Andy Smith. Just super easy. You can't screw that up. And then next up, and the guy that was announcing was a slightly elderly gentleman, and he didn't come over like you did and ask me how to pronounce my name. So in front of about 14 people, including the players that I was with, he goes, next up on the tee is John Bernatovicz. I looked around. It was like, Bernatovicz. Is there someone else here by that name? I didn't even walk up to the tee. And the guy looked around for a little bit and says, it's spelled Bernatovic. So then I realized it was me. I went up on the first tee and I hit my shot. But Bernatovicz is the worst pronunciation and most memorable one. I will never forget that moment because afterward I got a ticket for a free hot dog and Coke and had a great time at that tournament. And one of those foundational moments in my life I'll never forget.
I love it. So tell us more about that time frame. 10-year-old John, what did you want to be whenever you were growing up?
Two things. One, I wanted to be a professional golfer. I was always around the game since I was 7 years old. My dad was an adamant golf fanatic. He built his own foursome by having 3 boys. My poor sister was relegated to doing other things. I don't think she really wanted to play golf. She never swung a club, nor did my mom. But my dad had 3 sons, my brother Andy, Tony, and myself. And every weekend we would go out and play golf. And I used to play all these sports that most kids did. I played soccer, and I played flag football, I played baseball, I played basketball. And I'll never forget, Pete, I was 13 years old, sitting at the dinner table. Now, I was the youngest of 4 kids. All my siblings were gone at the time. It was just me, my mom, and my dad. And my dad looks at my mom. He's never said this in the history of his life. He says, honey, would you mind if I have a conversation with John while you clear the table and do the dishes? And I was like, well, that's kind of rude, Dad. Like, don't we usually help mom out with the dishes? He goes, this is a really important conversation I need to have with him. And my heart sunk into my stomach. I'm like,
oh boy.
I start thinking to myself, what did I do? What did I do in the last week that my dad's just going to like, John, you shouldn't have done that? My heart starts racing, and my dad says, I want to talk about your sports, the sports you're playing, and the involvement you have in your sports. And my dad was a CEO of a hospital. He ran our house like a CEO. He was the commander in chief in that particular regard and in charge. And he says, son, I want to teach you something called the jack of all trades, the master of none. And I'm 13 years old. I have no idea what this means. He says, you can be averagely good at soccer or basketball or football or baseball, or you could be great at golf. Now, my dad could have chosen to tell me I could have been great at any of those other sports, but he saw my potential in my golf game. And I didn't have any idea what he meant when he said that. So I followed up with him. I said, Dad, what does that mean? He says, well, I really think you should devote the remainder of your sports time in high school, in middle school and high school in the summers, devoted 100% to playing golf, because I think you have the potential to be an exceptional golfer. Now, you have to realize my dad would tell me later one of his dreams was for me to play on the professional golf tour. And he was living his dream a little bit through his son. But all I heard him say after that was, if you decide that's something you want to do, we're going to have you travel in the winter to play golf in warm weather, San Antonio, Florida, South Carolina. I couldn't have cared less about anything else he said. All I knew is I could get out of Northeast Ohio and go play golf as a kid. And that created a foundation for me. I ended up getting a golf scholarship to Kent State University. Mm-hmm. My coolest claim to fame at Kent State University, I was responsible for Ben Curtis's recruiting trip, which Ben Curtis is the only major champion to ever play at Kent State University, won the British Open back in 2003. And I have lifelong memories and even better friends from my time, not only in junior golf and in high school golf and college golf. It's such a wonderful foundational thing to do. And Pete and I, before we got on the show, we scheduled our first round of golf together at some point in 2025, which I can't wait to do.
Looking forward to it. John, oftentimes whenever I ask that question throughout the rest of the show, we find out that people maybe did not get the opportunity to live out their childhood dream. Or they didn't quite come back to it yet, or it changed drastically in most instances. So I think that's another cool piece about you is that, hey, I think you did really focus in on the golf game. You still take it very seriously today. But talk to us about the process. You get out of college, now you're doing this HR like a boss stuff today, but there was a couple of steps in between. What was the transition points along the way there?
I dreamt of being a professional golfer. My junior and senior year of college, you would play rounds of golf, and we were luckily at Kent State in the top 20 programs in the country. So we would play with some high-end caliber teams, mostly from the West or the South. And you're spending 4.5, 5 hours with these kids, and we were dialed in and focused on playing as well as we could, but there was a lot of downtime. So I would ask all those student athletes, what are you going to do after college?
Yeah.
And Pete, to a person, everyone said they were turning pro. And after about the 65th kid to tell me, I started doing the math in my head. And I said, I know I'm better than probably 70% of them, but I'm not better than 99% of them, which is what the math was. So I had to pivot. And my other dream was to own a business. When I was a kid, if I couldn't be a professional golfer, I wanted to own a business. And I ended up getting my business degree from Kent. I ended up working for a company called ADP, doing outsourced sales outsourcing in both small companies and national account companies. And that became my MBA, my executive MBA program, getting that job and working with some incredibly talented people. And it gave me the framework for eventually joining up with a boutique search firm, as well as starting a small business. Around 2003 was the timeline for that. And I honestly, Pete, before I read your book and well before I read your book, I did have a career plan of I need to create foundational skills in my business acumen. And the number one thing I recognized, because I had read about it, that most successful entrepreneurs have is the ability to sell and market. And so I really ran toward developing that skill and talent. Along the way, I learned and had a passion for the HR and payroll community. And I basically merged that sales skill, marketing skill, entrepreneurial spirit with my functional and industry knowledge in HR and payroll to found Willory in 2010, which is the primary job that I do every single day, is trying to deliver exceptional professional services on the HR tech and payroll and HR staffing side of our business.
And there's 6 businesses that you've been part of. You talked about Willory, you talked about where you worked before, the boutique staffing in between. What are these other businesses, John?
I own 2 companies. Willory's one, and I own a company called Sensible Water, which is Northern Ohio's largest reverse osmosis water bending company. For those of you from Northeast Ohio, you can get Aquafina type purified water for 25 cents a gallon, which is pretty crazy cool. That business
sales tactics continue onto the podcast. Well,
yeah, exactly. Yes. 25 cents a gallon, which you can't buy that anywhere cheaper, which is fun. And that was the business that I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug. And I don't tell my old manager at ADP this. He's from Pittsburgh, ironically, but I was a little bit more obsessed about selling those water machines and selling ADP deals. And when I realized that, I thought this isn't fair to me and to my employer. I have to get out and do entrepreneurship 100%. Willory, Sensible Water, that boutique search firm that I mentioned, I started in support with a business partner, a company that did We did legal recruiting, and we did that at the exact worst time, right at the start of the recession in 2007-8 timeline. And that business was probably my greatest failure. And then the two other companies I owned, I helped a friend start a lawn service, which ironically we were able to sell and make a little bit of money in the process, not lose anything in that business structure. But in God's mysterious way of working things into your life that are going to come around in the future, my son now owns a lawn service. So the experience of knowing that as well. And then I started an outsourced fractional sales management company that I sold about a year and a half or so ago. So those are the 6 companies that I have had experience with.
You've done a lot. The other piece that we talk about on here is the people that guided you. So as you were going through, college and the sports arena, you talked about the commander-in-chief and potentially your first head of your personal board of advisors might have been your father, and I'm guessing the family was in there as well. But as you're going through, you have coaches, you have teachers, you had this supervisor, the guy over in Pittsburgh, from Pittsburgh. Who were some of the folks that you leaned on for advice and guidance, and where'd you find them along the way?
Well, you're right about my dad and mom being cornerstones for my personal board of advisors. The unique part about my parents is my dad was a CEO and my mom was an acclaimed watercolor artist. She painted this mural that's behind me for those of you that can actually see this, if you're listening using video. But I was blessed to have, I'll call it a creative entrepreneurial spirit, is where I got that from both of them. And they both brought very unique perspectives to me. My dad, very practical in his business advice about surrounding yourself with people that make you better and challenging yourself, running toward difficult things, because that's where growth is. My mom was all about creativity and innovation. They really brought a unique foundation. Then I would give great credit to my siblings. My brother Tony was in sales. My sister Therese is an educator. I learned tremendous things about her faith and kindness to people. And my brother Tony was overly persistent and very caring for his family. My closest sibling in age and probably to personality is my brother Andy, who the reason why I wanted to own a business is that when I was growing up, he had a business and it just looked really cool that he had that business. And he and I talked to him today. We talk probably 5-6 times a week, not only just about my kids or his golf game, because he's also into golf, but about business and accountability and mentorship. We have a standing call every 2 weeks where we hold each other accountable to the things we're trying to get accomplished. And then along the way, I've met some incredible people. I mentioned a number of names, or I could mention a number of names of my time at ADP that taught me sales and corporate, what it is to work within a corporate organization. Those things are really cool. And then I'd say right now, the few people that stand out to me on my board of advisors, I realized that if I wanted to become great as a writer, if I want to become great as a keynote speaker, if I want to become great as a CEO, that I needed to get coaches in my life to support me. So Kathy Sullivan is my leadership coach, who I have a standing call with her once a month. I also see my therapist, Dr. Melissa Briggs Phillips, who is tremendous at navigating through some of the challenges that I have as a human being, like many of all of you have. Just because I get a lot of things done doesn't mean that I'm not challenged by things in my life. So Dr. Melissa, Dr. M is a great sounding board. Brian Rolnick Fox, I'll give him a shout out. He is my creative spirit and helping me make sure that when I'm giving my keynote speeches, that I'm making an impact on the people in the audience and I'm telling stories that connect with them. Those are really neat. I do have a sports performance coach named Dr. Jason, who's out of Michigan, because I see my ability to become and increase my chances of getting on that senior tour event at least once, is that I have to have a really strong mental approach to the game of golf, which has transcended into my speaking business.
Yeah.
And those are just a handful of people that I hire. I use them on occasion. I'm not seeing them every week. I'm seeing them over let's say in the course of a quarter, I'll have 4 meetings with those 6 people if I did my math right. And I just sprinkle in the areas of expertise. The last thing I'll share with you, is you probably can or cannot tell, is that I like to do a lot of things. I have had a short attention span for my entire life. And my ability to dabble in different things gets me going. At the same time, it has caused me to ensure that I develop the skill of discipline and staying focused on the task at hand. And I'm a huge Atomic Habits 1% better. So everything I just mentioned to you, CEO of my business, father for my kids, keynote speaker, author, I'm a 1% better every single day kind of guy, knowing that if I have that professional compounding interest on myself, that I'll be able to create things better today than I could a year or two ago because of that approach.
Continuously improving is something that I think we can all take away from this. And that's where we get into some of the accountability. You mentioned that you do this with your brother, but there's different accountability with each of those, board members. If you don't, you actually practice what the golf coach shared with you, you come back, couple months later, and you're still slicing. You probably don't slice, but a guy like me, definitely. He's not going to be super helpful if you don't take action on what they're sharing with you. So I think the accountability and doing things outside and doing things from the output of those conversations is a huge piece. They took time to give that guidance. Let's make sure that we act on it, whether it's in business, whether it's in the personal side as well.
To that point, and for those of you that believe it to be true that there are shortcuts in life and that you can become Mr. Beast, as an example, if you want to become a YouTuber within 5 minutes, it's just not how the way of the world works. I have seen personally in my own experience of the things that I have achieved success in, that it's taking an incredible long period of time to have a plan and to be consistent and disciplined around it and not sacrifice or not compromise with yourself about shortcutting anything. Kobe Bryant talks about the reason why he was the greatest player at the time in the NBA is that he never got ever bored with the basics. He just focused on doing what he thought, footwork, shot rotation. Pete, as a basketball player, you'll appreciate and understand Kobe's skill. He was just fanatical about it. And he also did something that I think takes the pressure off of you. He detached himself from the result. If you ever hear him talk about taking the last shot, he did not live or die by making that shot. He lived or died by the process that it took him to put him in a position to have a chance to take that shot. Sometimes you miss, sometimes you make, but how are we going to get a little bit better today so we can continue to improve?
And there's other stories you can reference about Kobe, how he was so addicted to his craft. People would go out and party after games and Kobe would go to the gym. People would, be late coming into practice or meetings or something because they were out and who knows what else. And he was already had one workout in and maybe was on, through a second one or something like that. And some of the Olympic athletes will talk about how crazy and driven and devoted he truly was. And this is just a fun story for those basketball folks out there. We always think of Kobe as a scorer, right? And somebody called him out on it. And he said, I could get a triple-double if I wanted to. Just what? Next game, he got a triple-double. And then they brought him back onto the show or another conversation. And he said, see, I told you it's possible, but I need to do what's best for the team. And if the team needs me to score more, then that's what I'm going to do. So it's just really interesting to see how much, comes out. And I think it's a piece that you've learned throughout all the businesses, John, is just because you can do something doesn't mean that as the leader of your team, of your organization, of a portfolio, just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the business needs most from you. So just think about that of everybody, right? 1% better. What are those habits? What are those things that you are doing? And what are the things that you're at work, at home, family, or team needs you to be doing?
Yeah, and I'll share one of the things I learned through my personal board of advisors was the criticality of hiring to your weakness. And recognizing as a small business owner, for those of you that are out there that are listening, you think you're the best at everything or no one else can do it quite the same way that you can. Because when you first start out, you got to do everything. You got to hire the people, you got to train them, you got to go sell, you got to market, you got to go do accounting, everything else. And then after a while, you think, well, because you're a CEO or you're an entrepreneur and you're generally not employable by a corporate company because you've made that choice, oh, I can do this better than anybody else. And then over time, what I realized is delegating certain things that were a weakness of mine or not a critical aspect that a CEO should be doing.
Yep.
And then having people that are highly competent at it and skilled, I quickly realized how bad I was at certain things. And this may be a bad thing to recognize, but onboarding an employee is probably my worst talent as a business leader. And I own an HR staffing and payroll firm that does technology, but I made too many mistakes onboarding. And after about the fourth mistake, I looked at myself and I said, I have to hire an HR manager for my HR firm. And then from there, our onboarding process went from we were getting D's and C's on our scorecard to getting A's consistently. And I was like, oh my God, thank God that I don't do that anymore. But just recognizing that, not being stubborn. And the thing that I will share with that, Pete, that I believe is so incredibly profound, that we as CEOs, and even for those that are in an organization as an executive level or a middle manager or whatever the case might be, one of the greatest compliments I think you can get is putting yourself out of a job. Yeah. Doing such a great role of building process, structure, accountability, a team, that all of a sudden when you look around, you're like, you know what? I don't know if they need me anymore. And in my case, that means I might be able to do other things. In a corporate environment case, that might be you going to your CEO and saying, hey, I don't think you need me as a C-level executive. I'm going to go find another opportunity. I don't think you need to replace me because the team, the systems, the process, the structure is in place. And that is a complete paradigm shift for a lot of people because they want to protect their job. They don't want to lose it. And I always marvel at people that look at me and say, I try to find ways to work my way out of a job because if I do that, then I know I've been successful.
I think another piece to add on there is you're setting up the brand and you're setting up the culture, right? People, before you can step away, and you've done a fantastic job with Willory. We did, I don't know how many different events in collaboration with you guys and the great, amazing team across the, East Coast throughout 2024. And I think that's something that you really drove home is the brand. So talk to us a little bit more about the speaking things, John. Yes, this can be sales. And I was going to say for your last one, your vulnerable moment. We're not going to record. Yes, we are going to record this. So definitely thank you for sharing that piece. But talk to us a little bit more, John, about some of the speaking. What is HR Like a Boss all about?
Sure. Well, HR Like a Boss came out of the core services that we have at Willory, which is staffing and technology consulting. I was blessed to work with hundreds of clients, meet thousands of HR professionals, either at client contacts or in networking or going to Schramm events or whatever the case might be. And I started learning things that were working well inside of corporate America around human resources. I started learning about things that weren't working. And more importantly, I was able to meet with and get to know a ton of HR professionals. And I started to feel the struggle that they had about no seat at the table. I'm relegated to hiring and firing. Everybody thinks I'm just a party planner, but I have so much more value to add. And I just got inspired around the time when both of my parents passed away in a short period of time to start writing because I found it to be therapeutic. Ended up writing a manuscript that Schramm ended up publishing. And one of the really cool things, as you know, Pete, that once you write a book, people think you're way smarter than you are because I'm not that smart. I was just courageous enough to write a bunch of words together that ended up sounding okay for a publisher to publish. But then as a result of having a book, people then think that you're validated as a keynote speaker or a speaker to stand in front of an audience. The reason why I feel like there's a little bit of truth to that because there's some branding around book sales and validation of you as a speaker, but there is so much more value of being able to take the words in your mind, put them onto a piece of paper, refine them and repeat them back so that when you tell your story, you have a logical format by which you're telling that story as opposed to making things up every single time that you speak. That to me was profound, getting my ideas out of my brain into and onto a piece of paper and ultimately a manuscript. Then as a result, because Schramm published my book, I've had the opportunity to speak at some of the national SHRM events, some of the state council, I'll call them state-run SHRM events, and many regional events. And I get more juice, I get more energy of doing anything in my professional career. I've reframed that. There's nothing more I get juice from than standing up on that stage and sharing the story. It's all about a celebration of the human resource function. It's practical steps about how you can do HR like a boss, do HR in a way that's amazingly awesome. And I also am really fanatical about making sure people know what it feels like to get a standing ovation. My guess is, Pete, you've hit many game-winning three-pointers or had a game-winning block as a basketball player, and you got that standing ovation and it felt pretty cool. Well, unfortunately, most HR professionals haven't had that experience, and I try to make sure they get the chance to have the feeling of what that kind of recognition means, because there are a few people that I've met inside of human resources who have gotten standing ovations at work because of the really amazing work that they've done. And I'm just able to inspire, tell that story. And my goal, Pete, when I do a keynote is, can I connect with just one person in that crowd of 100 or 1,000 to hopefully make a difference in their life, for them to do something a little bit different, take back the concepts back to work, and then make a profound impact on the employees that are working within their organization.
1% better for you, 1% better for them. John, as we wrap up, one of the last questions I'm going to ask you on here is, we talked about your personal board of advisors. We talked about the career map that you put together, and then we saw how it played out. Let's flip the script and talk about the value of this methodology inside an organization, right? We got a couple hundred employees, couple thousand employees. Where do you see the value of equipping each person with a personal board of advisors and guiding each of those employees and team members to having their career map past, present, and future?
The main thing I love about your book, Pete, congratulations again, and the framework of the work you're doing, is that in my heart, I believe that you need to do things inside of your business that go against the grain. And they go against this idea of, you hear this logic of, well, if I train you too much to how to do your job, you're going to do it well, and then you're going to leave. I don't think there's any greater compliment to an owner or a CEO or an executive team of developing someone to reach a potential for themselves that they think they need to leave the nest. They can go somewhere else to achieve great things. And we don't want to lose those top performers, but that's a great compliment. And I think if you have a conversation with your employee about, well, where were you before? What was your career plan? You're here currently in this state, and where do you want to go? And oh, by the way, how can I help you get there? That's a completely different conversation than, what's your number? Did you hit it this week? And because you didn't hit it this week, you're on a performance improvement plan. Just think of the parallels of those two dialogues. And this goes back to my quote. The thing that I love about Maya Angelou's quote is this idea about how we make people feel. I think about how having a conversation about your career plan, about putting a personal board of advisors together, because that's going to make you, my employee, my colleague, my peer, that's going to make you better. And ultimately that may mean you're going to leave my organization. But my guess is you and I are going to stay friends, because you recognize the impact I had of looking at your potential and making a unique recommendation that most employers aren't doing. And here's the trick. Here's the unique kind of dirty secret of all that. My guess is if you do it, most people won't leave. Most people end up staying, because you can truly understand how and where they want to go, and you can support them in getting them there. And knowledge is power. Once we know these things and people communicate it with you, like I've had a couple conversations, Pete, where I talked about, where do you want to go in your life? What do you want to do? And that role that they wanted to have was way different than the one that they currently were in. And I'd rather know that so that I can respond and react accordingly and figure out, well, are you really happy in this job? And unfortunately, in a couple of those cases, they weren't, because they weren't doing something that they loved. They aspired to do something else. And how do we get you into that role graciously? Maybe there's a position similar in our company, or otherwise, maybe it's not. And we work with them to see how we can shepherd them into another opportunity where they're going to be happy. They will remember that for the rest of their lives, and how you treat them versus what's your number, Where are you at? You didn't hit it. Let me hold you accountable.
How you made them feel. Exactly. John, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to read through a couple of notes here that I took along the way. Coming from a CEO and an artist, Bernatovicz on T1 to actually Bernatovicz. 10-year-old golfer John wanted to take the family foursome to the professional level. He still loves the game of golf. He learned about the John, or rather Jack, of all trades versus a master of none. Golf scholarship at Kent State University, and met some remarkable people and taught him a lot of remarkable life lessons. He still wanted to build a business of his own and started his professional journey at ADP. Put together this concoction and recipe of success from sales, marketing, communication, payroll, and HR to create Willory about 15 years ago. Also, quick ad for 25 cents a gallon in Northeast Ohio with Sensible Water. Please check it out and stay hydrated, my friends. The PBA started off with his family, mom, dad, Tony, Therese, and Andy. He continued to add things to his toolbox, and you really talked a lot, John, about the transferable skills that each of these board members helped you put into your toolbox. You shared with us the other members, a sports coach, a therapist, a business coach, a creative guide along the way. Reminded us not to compromise our success with shortcuts, and some of the conversation around Kobe Bryant, that we can't get bored with basics. You're driven to work your way out of a job, and I continue to learn so much from you. You delegated whenever you needed to, and you took time for that self-reflection. Schramm published HR Like a Boss. The community continues to thrive, and let's recognize great HR and give those standing ovations to folks that really need it. So in closing, John, thanks for joining us today. From the putting green to the HR stage, let's all get 1% better each day and make others better as well and feel great together.